Nelson Mandela at the Hatch Shell. On February 11, 1990, after 27 years, South African leader Nelson Mandela was released from prison. Mandela had disappeared from view in 1964 after giving a 4-hour speech at the conclusion of a sabotage trial, where he was convicted and received a life sentence. He'd become famous during the anti-apartheid era for his activism and his leadership in the outlawed African National Congress. In June of 1990, Mandela embarked on a U.S. tour, part of a larger 13-nation tour to raise awareness of the anti-apartheid struggle and to raise money for the African National Congress. In 12 days, he visited 8 U.S. cities, including Boston, a city known at that time both for its progressive causes and its racial divisions. He spoke at Madison Park High School, lunched at the Kennedy Library, and culminated his public day with a speech at the Hatch Shell. Mandela had become more controversial in the days before his visits to Boston by endorsing the Palestine Liberation Organization leader Yasser Arafat, Cuba's Fidel Castro, and Libya's Muammar Gaddafi, and for refusing to disavow previous support for violent resistance by South African blacks and the wholesale nationalization of South African industry. Protests at the visits were minimal, but security measures like keeping his motorcade route secret were instituted. At Madison Park High School in Roxbury, a late flight and a previous engagement delayed Mandela for hours. It was 87 degrees outside that day, and the temperatures soared inside the school, yet the crowd of 1,500 to 2,000 packed into the stuffy gymnasium soldiered through. When he finally arrived, he only spoke for less than 10 minutes, but the theme of Mandela's message was clear: the importance of education. He urged youth to stay in school, saying that a good education is necessary to help in the struggle. A private lunch with the Kennedy family members at the Kennedy Library was an acknowledgement of the strong connection Mandela felt to the Kennedy family. Robert Kennedy had visited South Africa in 1966 and given a memorable speech at the University of Cape Town. His Ripple of Hope speech, delivered at Cape Town, is widely considered the greatest speech of his career. Kennedy also met with ANC leaders and visited the Black township of Soweto. Later, Ted Kennedy had attempted to visit Mandela when he was in prison on Robben Island. The event at the Hatch Shell was joyful. The crowd and Mandela celebrated. The crowd was estimated at 250,000. People filled the oval lawn, hung from trees, and sat in canoes in the Charles River to be a part of the event. A concert preceded Mandela's speech. Musical guests included Bobby McFerrin, Livingston Taylor, Ladysmith Black Mambazo, Paul Simon, South Africa's Johnny Clegg and Savuka, Michelle Schacht, and a local rap group, Young Nation. The event started at noon, with Mandela scheduled to speak at 4 p.m. He spoke at 6 p.m. Mandela praised New England's leadership in the anti-apartheid movement and identified his own cause with the American Revolution. "It was you that supported us when very few knew of our existence, our trials, our tribulations," he said from the Hatch Shell stage. "It was you who rallied around our cause when we soldiered on by ourselves. Thus you become the conscience of American society." In his speech, Mandela specifically praised the pioneering and leading role of Massachusetts. Massachusetts was the first state in the United States to withdraw its pension funds from companies that were doing business in South Africa, and the city of Boston was one of the first cities in the United States to similarly divest. Mel King, one of the leaders of the Divestiture movement in Massachusetts, was given the honor of introducing the Mandelas at the Hatch Shell. Mandela also had a personal reason to visit the area. 2 of his daughters and 6 of his grandchildren lived in Massachusetts. That evening, fundraising took center stage as Mandela attended a $5,000 per couple dinner for 1,000 people. He raised an estimated $500,000 for the African National Congress during his visit to Boston. After his brief but memorable visit to Boston, Mandela headed down to Washington, D.C., where he met with President George Bush and Secretary of State James Baker, despite officially being on the terror watch list. In fact, Mandela would remain on the watch list until 2008, when President George W. Bush signed legislation formally lifting restrictions on Mandela and the ANC that had been in place since the mid-1980s.